success, and power. These are some of the qualities that an Audi brings to its owner. Strength, power, and luxury. These are the qualities that the owner finds in an Audi. Audi is not just a German car brand of the highest renown and good taste. It is a symbol of status and presence in the world on four wheels. The story behind the creator of the brand is an inspiring journey of entrepreneurship and hard work. Created by a poor boy who started his career competing with the owner of Mercedes, how did Audi become what it is today? The story of Audi begins with a German boy named August Horch, a name easily recognized by classic car enthusiasts. He was born on October 12, 1868 in the small town of Winningen, Germany. Although information about his youth is scarce, it is known that from a young age he was interested in mechanical engineering. His mother died when he was only 5 years old, and at the age of 13, he had to leave school to help his father. He worked as a blacksmith in the village. Since August Horch came from an evangelical family, he didn't get many job opportunities in his hometown, where most people were Catholic. Religious groups were deeply divided during this time in his life, especially since it was a traditional city, deeply attached to its customs. He couldn't have friends, jobs, or even a girlfriend from another religion. With not many options, he worked for a while as an apprentice in his father's profession, who also ended up losing some clients. They were prejudiced simply because he followed a religion, even though he married a Catholic woman after the death of little August's mother. There are rumors that during his teenage years, at the age of 15, he worked in a locksmith shop and later in a shipyard. And it was while working at this shipyard as a boat mechanic that he began to develop the skills that would be necessary for creating his first car years later. Eventually, he left the shipyard and started working for none other than Carl Benz, the man behind the also renowned Mercedes-Benz brand, which at that time was still known only as Benz. He began as a laborer in one of Benz's engine factories. Over the months, he managed to stand out and ended up being promoted by Carl Benz himself to the position of plant manager. Thus, he became responsible for the production of the company's engines, which would become his competitor a few years later. In this position, he was at the cradle of the automotive industry of the time, working daily with what was considered cutting-edge technology. Even so, August Horch was not satisfied with all that. In the 19th century world, cars were often contraptions looked down upon compared to carriages, and Benz at the time was content to produce these contraptions that went from point A to point B. But for the inventor of Audi, cars should be much more than just a replacement for wagons. He knew that people usually turn up their noses at anything new. After all, who would have ever thought that everyone would leave home with a cell phone in their pocket? August Horch tried to talk to Carl Benz several times about improving the design and efficiency of the cars that were being produced. He had ideas to improve the entire Benz product line, but Carl Benz was so conservative that he even refused to go to the auto shows of the time. For him, the cars Benz made were already everything the future could offer. After receiving some letters back from Carl Benz in which he disapproved of all his ideas, August Horch realized that Benz was too small for his dreams and desire to innovate. He had many ideas about what the perfect car should be like, starting with speed, which needed to be higher than that of the Benz cars, which reached the incredible mark of 17 kilometers per hour. So he quit Benz and founded Horch. According to Horch himself, the goal was simple: to create stronger, more powerful, and more luxurious cars. In the beginning, the company basically operated as a specialized workshop that repaired Benz engines. But even so, the owner worked intensely to build the first model of his newly created brand. Then, in 1901, the first Horch car was launched. At first, it was very similar to the very first Benz, which, by the way, was also the first car in the world. To give you a sense of the timeline, the first Benz came out in 1886. 15 years later, Horch introduced a model that already featured a drive shaft and a friction clutch concept. Two top-of-the-line technologies for that time which have been improved and are still used in cars today. With its 2 cylinders and 5 horsepower, the top speed of what we can call the primitive Audi was 32 kilometers per hour, which was more than enough to beat Benz in races. By gaining fans, attention, and market share, Horch drove rapid and ongoing vehicle evolution. A few months after launching this 2-cylinder car, the company grew significantly and began developing 4- and 6-cylinder engines. However, August Horch couldn't dedicate much time to his projects as there were internal problems to resolve. Horch had a falling out with the company's board of directors and ended up being expelled from it. Even though he was the founder himself, he left Horch in 1909, but even after being asked to leave his own business, his passion for cars remained alive in his heart. He wanted to found a new brand, but for legal reasons, he was prevented from using his last name as he did the first time when founding Horch Sociedad Anónima. At a meeting with the few friends and future partners of the new venture, the son of one of them had an idea. The boy studied Latin and suggested translating August Horch's last name. Horch in German means listen, and in Latin it would be Audi, the imperative form of the verb to listen. He liked the idea so much that he started signing his letters as August Audi Horch for the rest of his life. And so, still in 1909, Audi was born. The first Audi car was named Type A, and it was with this model that August Horch returned to racing. Even in this chaotic moment of his entrepreneurial life, he still outperformed Benz cars and even the cars from his previous company. Because it's a car that's over 100 years old, it's hard to look at it today and see Audi's core values, strength, power, and luxury. But it's worth emphasizing that 10 years before this model was launched, the world considered this to be a modern automobile. Even the word automobile itself was somewhat inadequate at the time. People simply saw them as horseless carriages because of the huge similarity. Audi was an extreme success, and by this point, even Carl Benz admired the work his former employee was doing. Even though they had different visions, they were never actually enemies. A very noble gesture from Horch, because Carl Benz, above all, was his mentor. The company kept winning many races and launching more modern cars year after year, entering a cruising speed phase that lasted for several years. August Horch no longer had to keep supervising the factories. The business was running as smoothly as clockwork, but this period of tranquility didn't last long. Germany at that time was still the Weimar Republic, which was going through financial crises caused by the instability in Europe. Also due to the 1929 crisis, which impacted the whole world. Even 3 years after the crisis, in 1932, knowing that the worst was yet to come for the German economy, 4 companies decided to form an alliance. Audi, Dampfkraftwagen, Horch, and Wanderer merged and created Auto Union. Under this union, the owners of these brands gained some advantages. They protected themselves from political persecution and also shielded their assets. And even though they were now in a partnership, they still had some individual autonomy under each brand. Auto Union also started to have a much greater presence in the market since each manufacturer became responsible for a specific segment. Audi started to produce exclusively more expensive and luxurious models. Horch was in the middle ground. Dampfkraftwagen produced simpler and entry-level vehicles as well as motorcycles. And finally, Wanderer also continued to operate in a similar way with entry-level models. It's worth noting the incredible performance Auto Union had in races then. It became very well known for its Silver Arrow, a model that broke a series of records that took decades to be surpassed. One specific record makes the history not only of Audi but of the German industry as a whole enter a dark chapter. The highest speed ever reached on a public road, which was about 432 kilometers per hour. This record was not broken by an Auto Union car but rather by a Mercedes-Benz. These were the record wagon, cars built with the sole purpose of breaking records. Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz started competing with each other due to pressure from the government at the time. Yes, by then Hitler was already in charge. The Mercedes-Benz Recordwagen went down in history, but the Audis broke the 400 km/h mark, killing its driver. The government officials responsible for overseeing the vehicle's performance didn't care at all. The government then wanted Germany to excel in everything, especially industries. Audi's ideals of strength, power, and luxury, which were established by a visionary and entrepreneurial mind, would now be used by an evil mind. Just like Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMW, and any German factory capable of manufacturing, even if it was just a single screw, they were all forced to contribute to the Axis during World War II. During the war years, August Horch was repeatedly coerced and intimidated by the government. There were several reports that he employed Jews in his factories in management positions. This happened especially from jealous engineers and workers who, for one reason or another, wanted to harm Auto Union and the reputation of its partners. They wrote letters to the Reich denouncing anything they thought could harm the company. In other words, besides the pressure imposed by the party at the time, there were still people adding fuel to the fire. Because of this, the government even made Auto Union completely lose the rights to some patents, because supposedly, due to the false accusations, they believed the inventors were Jewish. Auto Union was forced to develop military vehicles for the Reich and even founded a subsidiary responsible for manufacturing Stuka airplane engines, using slave labor in the factories. Although it's hard to determine if August Horch was a collaborator with the totalitarian regime, there are indications that he was not. He faced heavy persecution then, which he made clear in his biography. Besides, Elsa Kolmar, his second wife, was a woman of Jewish origin. At the end of the war, the Auto Union factories were completely bombed by the Allies. In fact, a good part of them ended up on the Soviet side of post-war Germany. The amount of technology acquired by the Soviet Union in this way is immeasurable. It is only known that, later on, much of it was used in their automotive industry. It didn't take long for the Soviet Gorkovsky Avtomobilny Zavod and UADZ to come out with technologies very similar to those of Auto Union. Not to mention the Trabant, often called a stolen Auto Union project. It was one of the symbol cars of East Germany and is also considered one of the worst cars in the world to this day. But even in a devastated landscape, August Horch's passion remained alive, building cars. He was an important figure in the restoration of the German industry and spent his last days restructuring factories and bringing back to life models that had been forcibly discontinued before the war, since most of what was left was in Soviet hands. He was forced to found Auto Union again in 1949, this time on the western side of Germany. However, in the early years of this Auto Union revival, things were not going well both financially and technologically. Unfortunately, 2 years later, in 1951, August Horch passed away at the age of 82, and he did not witness the birth, or rather the rebirth, of his beloved Audi. In his biography, he writes, "What can I boast about at the end of my life? The fact that, not without my help, the best racing cars in Germany were created. Young and brave people were driving them. They compete today with the same passion we had almost 50 years ago. In my later years, I can only feel the joy that keeps me warm for the rest of my life, the certainty that I did my job. Thousands of cars were produced with my name. I'm not ashamed of their quality. They are beautiful. They embody the work of tens of thousands of workers and engineers. And now, in my declining year, I can only dream of one thing, that cars with the Audi and Horch brands will one day travel around the world and bring joy to drivers on every continent. And when the Lord God asks me, 'What did you do?' I will simply answer, 'I built cars.'" August Horch was a symbol who connected two eras, the dawn of the automobile age and the period of rapid prosperity after the Second World War. During his life, he was an entrepreneur who lived through chaotic times. In total, there were 2 world wars and several periods of economic crises. He also endured the horrors of a dictatorship. Since his birth, his life had ups and downs. He experienced both poverty and wealth, but he never lost focus. To this day, the world enjoys the legacy and the work that this entrepreneur left in the automotive industry. And before we move on to the modern history of Audi, here's one last curiosity about its creator. August Horch never obtained a driver's license in his lifetime. Due to the financial problems faced at the time, Auto Union ended up being acquired by Daimler-Benz, thus becoming a subsidiary for almost 2 decades. But the market was modernizing and two-cylinder engines were no longer so appreciated. Consumers preferred the comforts that a 4-cylinder engine could offer. Since Auto Union mainly produced 2-cylinder vehicles, Daimler-Benz's interest ended up falling through. It was at this moment that the Volkswagen Group closed a deal with Daimler-Benz and bought Auto Union. Volkswagen did this with a specific goal in mind, to increase production of its then success, the Beetle. They succeeded, and in this acquisition, Auto Union's factories were the icing on the cake. With them, Volkswagen was able to produce an additional 60,000 units of the Beetle per year. At first, Volkswagen was completely against the idea of Auto Union's return. In fact, the board of directors at the time ordered that any logo or flag bearing Audi's 4 rings be removed from the factory. In fact, Heinz Nordhoff, who was the chief executive officer of Volkswagen, explicitly forbade Auto Union from developing anything, even if it was technology for the benefit of Volkswagen. Fearing that this would be the end of the brand and, by extension, of Audi, Auto Union's engineers and designers secretly met at the factory at night, completely hidden from the executive board and even from other engineers in the Volkswagen division. All of this was to develop a legend, the Audi 100. Even though it was developed in secret, when the Auto Union engineers finally presented the project, Volkswagen liked the idea so much that they completely reversed the decision to shut down Auto Union. The engineers proved that even though August Horch had passed away and become part of history, his ideals of resilience and perseverance were still very much alive in the brand. Eventually, after a series of operational restructurings of the brands under the Auto Union umbrella, the company was once again called simply Audi. Besides being a commercial strategy, this ended up serving as a kind of posthumous revenge for August Horch, who, despite having been expelled from his own company, now, thanks to Volkswagen's latest decision, had much of his life's work unified under the brand. The Audi 100, later the A6, was a huge success, which, besides having sold about 800,000 units, truly marked the rebirth of Audi and opened the doors for the first generation of the Audi 80, another icon among enthusiasts. For the first time, Volkswagen realized the importance that Audi would have in the group's business. It's no secret that many Audi car models are nothing more than improved versions of Volkswagen cars. That's nothing new. Exactly for this reason, Volkswagen realized that this stronger, more powerful, and more luxurious segment would appeal to the taste of the American consumer, where Volkswagen's regular cars have never been that successful. And so, the last dream of August Horch began to be fulfilled. Audi began to travel the world and enter every continent. Along with over 9,000 patents, one invention especially earned Audi great industry respect at the time. In the 1980s, a 4-wheel drive system was commissioned, which was supposed to equip both a Volkswagen military vehicle and an Audi sports car. At first, the project became known as Development 262. It didn't take long for the project to be named Quattro, which also gave its name to a rally legend with the same name, the Audi Quattro. The tremendous success of the Quattro technology in rally competitions established a new concept of performance and safety for the global automotive industry. This 4-wheel drive technology, which was born from competitions, was also used in Audi's passenger cars, providing a lot of safety and sportiness when desired. In addition to making the car more reliable on slippery surfaces, the sound of the Audi Quattro still echoes in the industry today. Several manufacturers, including Audi's direct competitors, began adopting similar technologies to match the Quattro system's results. At this point in history, Audi had already done its homework and proven itself very capable of competing with other giants, now modern, like Bayerische Motorenwerke and Mercedes. This clash of titans became very evident in the European and North American markets, but here in Brazil, Audi arrived without any stress. On November 18, 1993, during a business trip to Germany, Ayrton Senna celebrated an agreement that would make Senna import the official and exclusive importer of Audi in Brazil. The goal was to combine Audi's reputation for excellence and sportiness with the legacy and values represented by Ayrton Senna. According to Senna himself, the idea of closing this partnership with Audi was precisely to have a business venture when he decided to retire from Formula One. On March 29, 1994, at the former Varig hangar at Congonhas Airport, Ayrton Senna hosted Audi's party for about 2,000 guests. Some extremely rare units are the result of this Senna-Audi partnership, such as the S4 Avant, which Senna received as a gift when he signed with Audi. Unfortunately, less than a year after the day he signed the agreement in Germany, Senna passed away, the victim of the accident at the Imola circuit, on May 1, 1994. With Senna's tragic passing, the hysteria of that moment caused Senna Import to see an increase in its sales figures, which lasted for a few years. In December, 1999 Audi decided to update the terms with Senna Import, which now became a subsidiary of the Germans, being renamed Audi Senna Limitada. In the document signed at the time, it was decided that 51% of the shares would belong to the German automaker and 49% would remain with the Brazilian company. A few years later, more precisely on March 17, 2005, Audi's German headquarters announced the end of the partnership with the Senna family and took over the entire operation in the country. Senna Import was dissolved after selling over 64,000 Audi vehicles in Brazil from 1994 to 2004. Audi's respect for the Senna family continues today, even as the company chose to nationalize A3 sedan production. The very first unit produced at the São José dos Pinhais plant received its own special design in honor of Ayrton Senna, created by the artist Eduardo Cobra. In addition to leaving fond memories for his fans, Senna brought a brand that, until then, was unknown in Brazil. The bond between them quickly made Audi earn the respect of consumers and gain ground on Brazilian streets from the very first moment it arrived here. According to Senna, in an interview before he flew to Germany, "I've always liked Audi cars for their elegant design and sportiness, with high-quality finishing and cutting-edge technology. These German cars have everything to please the Brazilian consumer who knows little about the brand's potential." Well, who would have thought that one day, part of August Horch's great dream of seeing Audi travel around the world would be fulfilled by Ayrton Senna? Although he did not live to see Audi's rise, the legacy left by August Horch lives on to this day. Whenever you see an Audi, know that the image it projects is exactly what its creator wanted more than 100 years ago. Far beyond trivial values, like mere ostentation, an Audi, above all, carries the values behind its very conception. Dedication, hard work, character, and perseverance were the ingredients that created more strength, more power, and more luxury. For those with faith, nothing is impossible. After all, Audi, a jewel of the automotive industry, was born from the ideas of a poor boy who one day decided to chase his dreams and build cars.